The advertisement had been simple, brutally so. Rancher seeks wife. Must be strong, practical, uncomplaining. Montana Territory. Hardship guaranteed. Respond only if serious. Clara Whitmore had read it 17 times before the ink dried on her response letter. Sitting in her brother's Philadelphia townhouse, surrounded by silk wallpaper and the suffocating expectations of polite society, she'd made a choice that everyone would call insane. She called it freedom. Now, 6 weeks later, she stood on the platform of a nameless Montana whistle stop, watching a man approach through the dust. Ethan Cole, her husband-to-be, the stranger who'd signed his name to a contract that would bind their lives together. He was taller than she'd imagined, broader. His face was weathered like old leather, carved with lines that spoke of hard winters and harder choices. His eyes, gray as storm clouds, swept over her once, and something flickered there. Disappointment? Doubt? "Miss Whitmore." His voice was rough, unused to courtesy. "Mr. Cole." Clara kept her spine straight, her chin level. She'd worn her simplest dress, had packed only what could fit in 2 trunks, had prepared herself for rustic conditions, but she hadn't prepared for the way he looked at her, like she was a mistake already made. "This is everything?" He gestured to her luggage. "Yes." "No maid? No companion?" "No." His jaw worked silently. Around them, the few townspeople who'd gathered to witness the arrival whispered behind their hands. Clara caught fragments. "Too fine. Won't last a month, poor fool." She wasn't sure if they meant her or Ethan. "The wagon's this way." He didn't offer his arm, didn't take her bags, just turned and expected her to follow. Clara grabbed the smaller trunk herself. It was heavier than she'd anticipated, but she'd be damned if she'd ask for help in front of these staring eyes. The wagon was more rust than paint, pulled by 2 horses that looked as skeptical of her as their owner. Ethan loaded her trunks without ceremony, then climbed up to the driver's seat. He didn't help her up, didn't look back to see if she'd managed. She managed. The ride to the ranch took 2 hours through landscape that grew progressively more hostile. Philadelphia's manicured parks and cobblestone streets gave way to endless grass, jagged mountains, and a sky so vast it made Clara feel like she might fall upward into it. Ethan didn't speak. Not one word. Finally, Clara broke the silence. "How long have you had the ranch?" 12 years. "Do you run it alone?" "Got 2 hired hands. They stay in the bunkhouse." "What do you raise?" "Horses mostly. Some cattle." He paused. "Had sheep once. Lost 'em to wolves." The conversation died again. Clara watched the landscape roll past, watched Ethan's rigid shoulders, watched the way his hands gripped the reins with the kind of tension that never fully released. "Mr. Cole," she said finally, "I understand this arrangement is as much a business transaction for you as it is for me. But if we're to live together, some basic communication seems advisable." His head turned slightly. Not enough to look at her, just enough to acknowledge she'd spoken. "What do you want to know?" "What you expect, what you need, why you sent for a wife instead of simply hiring more help." The silence stretched so long Clara thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Needed someone permanent, someone with a stake in keeping things running." His voice was flat, factual. "Hired help leaves, wives stay." That's a rather cold assessment of marriage. It's an honest one. Clara studied his profile, the hard line of his jaw, the scar that cut through his left eyebrow, the way he stared straight ahead as if the horizon held answers he hadn't found yet. "And what do you expect from me, specifically?" "Cooking, cleaning, basic ranch work when needed." He paused. "Children, eventually. If you're able." Heat crept up Clara's neck, but she kept her voice steady. "I see. And in return?" "Roof over your head, food, protection, your name on the property deed if you stay 5 years. It was the most he'd said since they'd met, and every word was transactional, clinical, as if they were negotiating the purchase of livestock. "That seems fair," Clara said quietly. Something in her tone made him glance at her fully for the first time. His eyes narrowed slightly, as if trying to solve a puzzle he hadn't expected to encounter. "You're not what I expected," he said finally. "No." Clara met his gaze directly. "I don't imagine I am. The letter said you were practical, strong. I am. You look like you've never done a day's hard work in your life. Looks, Clara said crisply, are often deceiving. His expression didn't change, but she caught the slightest twitch at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, more like acknowledgement of a point scored. They rode the rest of the way in silence, but it felt different now. Less hostile, more like two strangers taking each other's measure before a long journey together. The ranch, when it finally appeared, was exactly what Clara had steeled herself for, and somehow worse. A main house that was barely more than a cabin, wood-sided and weathered, a barn that leaned slightly to the left, corrals that needed mending. Everything spoke of hard work deferred, of a man stretched too thin trying to hold together something constantly threatening to fall apart. It's not much, Ethan said, and for the first time, Clara heard something other than flat pragmatism in his voice, something that might have been defensiveness or shame. It's honest, Clara replied. I appreciate honesty. He looked at her sharply, as if checking for mockery. Found none. His shoulders relaxed fractionally. I'll show you inside. The cabin's interior was sparse to the point of severe. One main room serving as kitchen, dining area, and living space. A single bedroom off to the side, Ethan's presumably. A ladder leading to a loft. You can have the bedroom, Ethan said. I'll move my things to the loft. Clara turned to him. That's not necessary. We're married, Mr. Cole. Or we will be, once we find a minister. Found one already. He's riding out tomorrow. Ethan's face was carefully blank. But I'll sleep in the loft just the same, until you're comfortable with other arrangements. It was, Clara realized, the closest thing to kindness he'd offered. A brutal sort of consideration, but consideration nonetheless. Thank you, she said softly. He nodded once, then grabbed her trunks and carried them to the bedroom. Clara followed, watching him set them down with surprising care. There's a root cellar out back, he said, not looking at her. Chickens in the coop. Well, water's clean. Privies, Mr. Cole. Clara waited until he met her eyes. I'm not afraid of hard work. I'm not afraid of primitive conditions. I didn't come here expecting luxury. Then why did you come? The question hung between them, sharp and genuine. Clara considered lying, considered offering some sanitized version of the truth, but something in his eyes, something raw and unguarded for just a moment, made her choose honesty instead. Because in Philadelphia, I was drowning in silk and propriety. Because my brother was arranging a marriage to a man 3 times my age. Because every choice was made for me. Every word I spoke was measured against what was proper for a woman of my station. She held his gaze. I came here because this life, hard as it is mine to make. That's worth more than comfort. Ethan stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. Fair enough. He moved toward the door, then paused. Supper's at 6. Nothing fancy. I'm not much of a cook. Then it's fortunate, Clara said, that I am. That almost smile flickered across his face again. We'll see. He left her alone in the small bedroom. Clara sat on the narrow bed, rough blankets, thin mattress, and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. What had she done? But no, she wouldn't second guess. Not now, not ever. This was the life she'd chosen. She'd make it work. Clara unpacked efficiently, hanging her few dresses on pegs, storing her underthings in a battered chest of drawers. At the bottom of her second trunk, wrapped carefully in oilcloth, were the things she hadn't mentioned in her letters. Medical texts, veterinary manuals, the instruments she'd studied in secret back when her mother was too ill to stop her and her brother too distracted to notice. The things that made her useful in ways Ethan Cole couldn't possibly expect. She hid them beneath her winter clothes and went to explore the kitchen. It was, predictably, a disaster. Minimal supplies, poorly organized, everything coated in the fine dust of neglect. Clara found flour, salt, some questionable jerky, and a few withered vegetables in the root cellar. Not much to work with. She made it work anyway. By 6 o'clock, she'd produced a simple stew that actually smelled edible, biscuits that would be passable if not inspired, and strong coffee that could wake the dead. Ethan came in exactly on time, 2 ranch hands trailing behind him. They stopped short when they saw the table set, the food steaming, Clara standing there in a clean apron like she'd been doing this for years. "Boys, this is Miss Whitmore," Ethan said gruffly. "She'll be my wife come tomorrow. You'll treat her with respect." The older of the two men, grizzled, 60s, missing several teeth, nodded. "Ma'am, name's Jack." The younger one, barely 20 with nervous eyes, managed, "Samuel, ma'am." "Gentlemen," Clara gestured to the table, "please sit. There's plenty." They ate in near silence, but Clara caught the glances between the three men, the surprise in their eyes, the way Jack raised his eyebrows at Ethan as if to say, "You didn't mention she could cook." "This is good," Samuel said finally, his voice awed as if he'd forgotten food could taste like anything other than survival. "Thank you, Samuel." Ethan said nothing, but he had seconds, then thirds. After the hands returned to the bunkhouse, Ethan lingered by the door. "That was better than expected," he said. "I'm glad it met expectations." "Exceeded them." He paused, uncomfortable with the admission. "I'll be up early, 4:30. Don't feel obliged to, but I'll have breakfast ready at 5, Clara interrupted. "You don't have to cheat, Mr. Cole." Clara set down the dish she'd been washing. "I didn't come here to be a decorative burden. I came here to be useful. Let me be useful." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right then. 5 o'clock. That night, Clara lay in Ethan's bed, her bed now, and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of the Montana frontier. Wind against wood. Horses shifting in the barn. The creak of the ladder as Ethan climbed to the loft. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Left everything familiar, traveled 2,000 miles, and bound herself to a stranger in a land that wanted her dead. It should have terrified her. Instead, Clara smiled into the darkness and slept better than she had in years. The minister arrived at noon the next day, a traveling preacher with kind eyes and a well-worn Bible. He performed the ceremony in the main room with Jack and Samuel as witnesses. The whole affair took less than 10 minutes. "Do you, Ethan Cole, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." "And do you, Clara Whitmore, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." "Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I pronounce you man and wife." No kiss, no celebration, just signatures on paper and a handshake with the minister. Clara was married. Mrs. Cole now. The name felt strange, heavy, real. Life on the ranch settled into a rhythm quickly. Clara rose at 4:30, had breakfast ready by 5, spent her mornings cleaning and organizing the chaos Ethan had been living in. Afternoon, she worked in the garden she'd started, mended clothes, preserved what little food they had. Ethan watched her with constant suspicion, as if waiting for her to break, to complain, to reveal herself as the fragile city woman he'd expected. Clara gave him nothing to confirm his doubts, but she felt them. In the way he'd check her hands for blisters, the way he'd insist on carrying anything heavier than a water bucket, the way he'd hesitate before asking her to help with ranch work, as if expecting her to refuse. It grated on her more than the actual hardship did. 2 weeks into the marriage, the first real test came. Clara was in the garden when she heard shouting from the barn. She dropped her tools and ran, arriving to find Ethan, Jack, and Samuel standing around a horse in obvious distress. "What's wrong?" Clara asked. "Mare's foaling," Jack said grimly, "but something's not right. Been trying for 2 hours now." Clara moved closer. The mare was on her side, sides heaving, eyes rolling with panic. Clara had seen this before, in the veterinary text she'd studied, in the one summer she'd spent secretly helping Dr. Morrison back in Philadelphia. "The foal's positioned wrong," she said. Ethan glanced at her. "How do you know?" "The contractions are too frequent and nothing's progressing. She's been in active labor too long." Clara knelt by the mare's head, running her hands over the distended belly. "If we don't intervene, we'll lose them both." "Nearest veterinarian is 40 miles, Samuel said. "Won't make it in time." Ethan's face was stone, but Clara saw the muscle jumping in his jaw. This mare was valuable, possibly the difference between the ranch surviving another year or going under. "I can help her," Clara said quietly. 3 sets of male eyes fixed on her with identical expressions of disbelief. "You?" Ethan's voice was flat. "Me." "You've done this before?" Clara hesitated. The truth was complicated. I've studied it extensively, and I've assisted with difficult births. On horses? On various animals, yes. It wasn't quite a lie. Dr. Morrison had shown her everything, even if he'd never let her perform a full procedure alone. Even if society would have been scandalized to know a woman of her class had been elbow-deep in blood and birth instead of presiding over tea services. Ethan stared at her. She could see him weighing options, calculating risks. The mare screamed, a terrible, almost human sound. "What do you need?" he asked. Clara didn't waste time on relief. "Hot water, clean cloths, rope, and I need you three to hold her steady." They moved with surprising coordination. Within minutes, Clara had everything assembled. She stripped off her outer dress, rolled up her sleeves, and scrubbed her hands and arms with harsh lye soap. "This is going to be unpleasant," she warned. "We've all seen birth before," Jack said. "I meant unpleasant for her." Clara nodded to the mare. "She won't understand I'm helping. She'll fight." Clara knelt behind the laboring horse, took a steadying breath, and reached inside to assess the problem. The foal's positioning was worse than she'd thought. One leg folded back, the head turned wrong. Without correction, it would kill them both. "Talk to me," Ethan said, his voice surprisingly steady. "What do you feel?" "Front leg is caught. I need to reposition it, then turn the head." Clara worked carefully, following the steps she'd memorized from texts, from Dr. Morrison's instructions. The mare thrashed. Samuel and Jack threw their weight across her neck to keep her down. "Easy," Clara murmured, unsure if she was talking to the horse or herself. "Easy now." Her hands found the folded leg. Carefully, so carefully, she straightened it. The mare's scream made Clara's teeth ache, but she didn't stop, couldn't stop. "Got the leg," she reported. "Now the head." This was the dangerous part. One wrong move and she could rupture something vital. Clara closed her eyes, working by feel alone, visualizing the anatomy from her books. "Turn left. Push gently. Guide. Don't force. There." The foal's head shifted into position. "It's aligned," Clara said. "She should be able to deliver now on her own." They waited. The mare strained, once, twice, and then in a rush of fluid and membrane, the foal emerged. Clara fell back, hands shaking, dress soaked in blood and worse. The foal lay still. Too still. "No," she whispered. Before anyone could react, Clara was moving again. She cleared the membrane from the foal's nose and mouth, rubbed its chest vigorously with a cloth. Nothing. She bent down, covered the tiny muzzle with her mouth, and breathed. "Jesus Christ," Samuel muttered. Clara breathed again and again, willing life into the small body. The foal's chest fluttered, then heaved. Then it coughed, shook its head, and drew a gasping breath on its own. Clara sat back on her heels, trembling all over. The foal was breathing. The mare was already turning to nuzzle her baby. They'd both survived. She looked up to find all three men staring at her with expressions she couldn't quite read. Shock. Respect. Something like awe. "Where the hell did you learn to do that?" Jack asked. "Philadelphia," Clara said, which was true and explained nothing. Ethan extended a hand to help her up. When she took it, his grip was firm, warm, and lasted a moment longer than strictly necessary. "You saved them both," he said quietly. Clara looked down at herself, covered in blood, hair falling from its pins, shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline. I should clean up." "Clara." Ethan's use of her first name stopped her. He'd never used it before, always Miss Whitmore or Mrs. Cole. "Thank you." The words cost him something. She could see it in the tension of his jaw, the stiffness of his shoulders. Ethan Cole was not a man comfortable with gratitude, with admitting he'd needed help. "You're welcome," Clara said simply. She walked back to the house on legs that barely held her, stripped off her ruined dress, and washed with cold water from the basin. Her hands were still shaking. She'd done it. Actually done it. All those hours of study, all that secret learning, it had mattered. She'd proven she belonged here in a way that cooking and cleaning never could. That night at dinner, the atmosphere was different. Samuel couldn't stop talking about what Mrs. Cole done with that mare. Jack told the story twice, embellishing details Clara didn't remember. Even Ethan, taciturn as ever, contributed small confirmations. And when Clara met Ethan's eyes across the table, she saw something new there. Not doubt, not suspicion, respect. The next morning, Clara woke to find a new dress laid across the chair in her room. Simple, practical, made from sturdy fabric. Not fine, not fashionable. Perfect for ranch work. There was no note, no explanation. But when she came down to start breakfast, Ethan was already up, coffee made, looking at her with an expression she was beginning to recognize as his version of approval. "Morning," he said. "Good morning." Clara touched the fabric of the new dress. "Thank you for this. Figured you'd need it after yesterday." He paused, uncomfortable. The old one was unsalvageable. Yes, it was. They stood in the pre-dawn darkness, coffee cups warming their hands, and something shifted between them. Not friendship, exactly, not yet, but a foundation, an understanding. "There's a town meeting next week," Ethan said. "Folks will want to meet you. See what kind of woman I married." "And what kind of woman is that?" Ethan looked at her directly. "The kind who doesn't run when things get hard. The kind who gets her hands dirty." He paused. "The kind I didn't think existed." It was the most personal thing he'd ever said to her. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks, felt something warm and dangerous bloom in her chest. "I should start breakfast," she said. "Yeah." But he didn't move. Neither did she. The moment stretched, fragile and new, until Jack's footsteps on the porch broke it. The days that followed fell into a new rhythm. Ethan began asking Clara's opinion on ranch matters, started explaining his decisions, his plans, stopped watching her like she was a piece of fine china waiting to shatter. The mare and foal thrived. Clara checked them daily, monitoring for infection or complications. Found none. The little filly, Samuel had named her Miracle, grew stronger by the day. News of what Clara had done spread through the sparse community faster than she would have thought possible. When Sunday came and they made the ride to town for church, she was met with stares, but different ones now. Curious rather than dismissive, measuring rather than mocking. After the service, women approached her, cautious, testing. "Heard you saved Ethan's mare," one said. Maggie Turner, the blacksmith's wife. "The mare did most of the work," Clara replied. "I just helped her along." "That's not what I heard." Maggie's eyes were sharp, intelligent. "Heard you reached right in and repositioned that foal. That you breathed life into it when it wasn't moving." "I did what was necessary." "Most women would have fainted." Clara smiled slightly. "I'm not most women." "No," Maggie said slowly, approval dawning in her expression. "I don't suppose you are." It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was a door cracking open, an invitation to prove herself further. Clara intended to accept. The ride home was quiet. Ethan handled the reins with his usual competence, but Clara caught him glancing at her sidelong. "What?" she asked finally. "You handled them well. The town women. I answered their questions. They can be—" He searched for words. "Difficult, especially with outsiders." "I am an outsider." "Yeah." Ethan's jaw worked. "But maybe not for long." It was as close to a compliment as he'd likely ever give. Clara tucked it away, a small warmth against the constant Montana wind. That night, the wind picked up. Clara woke to the sound of shutters banging, wood creaking. She lay in the darkness and listened to the house protest the growing storm. Above her, in the loft, she heard Ethan moving, restless. She was starting to understand him, she realized. This hard, closed-off man who'd ordered a wife like one might order supplies. He wasn't cruel, wasn't cold, just damaged, worn down by years of holding everything together alone, of trusting no one, of expecting disappointment. He'd expected her to disappoint him too. The fact that she hadn't seemed to confuse him more than please him. Clara smiled in the darkness. Let him be confused. She'd spent 26 years being exactly what everyone expected. It was liberating to be surprising instead. The wind howled louder. Clara pulled the blankets closer and drifted back to sleep, unaware that the storm was just beginning, that this wind was the harbinger of something far worse, that in 3 weeks it would bring a blizzard that would test everything they'd built and force both of them to choose, once and for all, what they were willing to risk for each other. But tonight, there was only wind and possibility, and the slow, careful building of something neither of them had names for yet. Tonight, that was enough. 3 weeks after saving the mare, Clara stood in the pre-dawn darkness of the kitchen, watching frost creep across the window panes in crystalline patterns. October had arrived with teeth bared, temperatures dropping so fast that water left in buckets overnight turned to solid ice. The Montana frontier was reminding her, reminding all of them, that survival here was never guaranteed. She heard Ethan descend the ladder from the loft, his movements quiet despite his size. He'd developed a rhythm she could track without looking, the pause as his boots hit the floor, the stretch of muscles still stiff from sleep, the moment he spent just standing there as if gathering himself to face another brutal day. "Coffee's ready," Clara said without turning. "You're up early." His voice was still rough with sleep. "Couldn't rest. The temperature's dropping fast." Ethan moved to the window beside her, and Clara was suddenly aware of how close they were standing. Close enough that she could smell the soap he used, the leather of his work clothes, something else that was just distinctly him. "Storm's coming," he said, his breath fogging the glass. "Big one, if I'm reading the signs right." "How big?" "Bad enough." He turned to look at her, and in the dim light his face was all hard angles and shadows. "We'll need to bring the horses into the near pasture, stock extra feed in the barn, make sure the shutters are secure. I can help." "I know you can." The words came easier now. A month ago he would have argued, would have insisted she stay inside where it was safe, but Clara had proven herself too many times for him to waste breath on protecting her from work she was capable of handling. "Get Samuel to show you how to reinforce the chicken coop. Those birds are too damn stupid to survive a real blow on their own." Clara smiled despite the worry coiling in her stomach. "I'll make sure they're secure." They worked through breakfast in companionable silence, then split up to prepare. Clara found Samuel already in the barn, his young face tight with worry. "Mr. Cole say how bad it's going to be?" he asked as they carried extra hay bales from the storage shed. "Bad enough to prepare for the worst." Samuel nodded, his hands working automatically even as his eyes kept drifting to the northern horizon. "I've been through 3 Montana winters now. Each one tries harder to kill you than the last." "Encouraging," Clara said dryly. "Just being honest, ma'am." He paused, then added, "But you seem the type who'd rather know the truth than be coddled." "You're right about that." They worked steadily through the morning. Clara's hands grew numb despite her gloves, her muscles aching from hauling feed and water and supplies. But she didn't slow down, didn't complain. Around her the ranch moved with urgent purpose. Jack mending weak points in the barn roof, Ethan driving the horses in from the far pasture, everyone racing against a clock only the sky could see. By noon, the first snowflakes began to fall. Light, deceptive, beautiful even, drifting down like scattered feathers. "Don't let 'em fool you," Jack said, appearing at Clara's elbow as she secured the last of the chicken coop reinforcements. "Pretty snow like this?" "That's just the warning. Real storm's still building." Clara looked up at the sky. The clouds had a strange quality to them, heavy and yellow-gray, pressing down like a physical weight. The air felt wrong, too still, too quiet. "How much time do we have?" "Hours, maybe less." Jack's weathered face was grim. "You ever been in a real blizzard, ma'am?" "No." "Then let me tell you straight, you don't go outside once it hits. Don't matter if you hear animals screaming, don't matter if the barn sounds like it's coming apart. You stay inside, because that wind will turn you around so fast you won't know which way is up, and you'll freeze to death 10 feet from your own door without ever knowing how close you were to safety." Clara's throat went dry. "I understand." "Make sure you do." Jack's eyes were kind but serious. "I've seen men die in storms like this. Good men, strong men. The cold don't care how tough you are." She nodded, and Jack squeezed her shoulder once before heading back to his work. The afternoon disappeared in a blur of preparation. Clara cooked enough food to last days, stew that could be reheated, bread that would keep, anything that wouldn't require them to go outside for supplies. She filled every container they had with water, organized medical supplies, pulled extra blankets from the trunks. Ethan came in as she was checking their lamp oil reserves. "That's good thinking," he said, nodding at the supplies she'd laid out. "I don't want to be caught unprepared." "You won't be." He moved closer, and Clara saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw was set. "Clara, listen to me. If this storm gets as bad as I think it will, we stay inside, no matter what. You understand?" "Jack already gave me that lecture. I'm giving it again." Ethan's hand caught her arm, not roughly but firmly enough to make her stop and look at him. "I mean it. I've seen what these storms can do. I've lost animals, lost parts of the barn, nearly lost Jack one year when he was fool enough to try checking the livestock. You don't go out there." Clara studied his face. This close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the scar tissue on his knuckles, the way worry had carved itself into his features. This wasn't just caution. This was fear. "I promise," she said quietly. "I won't do anything stupid." "Good." But he didn't let go of her arm. "I need you to survive this, Clara. The ranch needs you. I need—" He stopped himself, jaw clenching. "Just stay safe." Before she could respond, he released her and turned away, grabbing his coat. "I'm doing one more check of the animals. Be back before dark." He left before she could ask what he'd been about to say. The snow fell heavier as afternoon faded into early evening. By the time Ethan returned, the wind had picked up, driving the flakes horizontal, turning the world beyond the windows into a swirling white chaos. Samuel and Jack came in for supper, their faces red with cold, ice crusted in their beards. "Everything's as secure as we can make it," Jack reported, accepting the bowl of stew Clara handed him with grateful hands. "Horses are in the near barn, cattle are in the windbreak. Nothing else we can do now but wait it out." They ate quickly, tension making everyone quiet. Outside, the wind began to howl, a sound like nothing Clara had ever heard, primal and hungry, as if the storm itself was alive and seeking a way in. "You boys better get to the bunkhouse while you still can," Ethan said. "This is going to get worse before it gets better." Jack and Samuel didn't argue. They bundled up, tied a rope between them. "So we don't lose each other in the 20 feet between here and there," Jack explained grimly, and pushed out into the growing maelstrom. Clara watched from the window as they disappeared into the white, visible only as dark shapes for a few seconds before the storm swallowed them completely. Her heart hammered. They were so close. The bunkhouse was right there. But in this, distance meant nothing. Endless minutes later, she saw the lantern flash 3 times from the bunkhouse window, the signal that they'd made it safely. "Thank the stars," she breathed. "Don't thank anything yet," Ethan said behind her. "Storm's just getting started." He was right. Over the next hour, the wind increased from a howl to a scream, battering the cabin with such force that the walls shook. Snow didn't just fall, it attacked, driven by wind that found every crack, every gap, every weakness in their shelter. Clara and Ethan worked together, stuffing rags in the gaps around windows and doors, banking the fire high, moving anything that could freeze away from the outer walls. "How long will it last?" Clara asked, having to raise her voice over the wind's shriek. "Could be hours, could be days." Ethan wedged another rag into a crack. "No way to know." Night fell early. The world beyond their walls transformed into absolute darkness, broken only by the white fury of snow caught in the lamplight's reach. The temperature inside the cabin dropped despite the fire. Clara pulled on every layer she owned and still felt cold seeping into her bones. "Come here," Ethan said, gesturing to the chair he'd pulled close to the hearth. "Closer to the fire." Clara sat, and after a moment's hesitation, Ethan draped one of the heavy blankets around her shoulders. His hands lingered briefly, a touch that might have been accidental or might have been something else. "Thank you," Clara said. He settled into the other chair, his own blanket pulled tight. For a while they just sat there, listening to the storm rage, watching the fire dance. "Tell me about Philadelphia," Ethan said suddenly. Clara looked at him in surprise. "What do you want to know?" "Anything. Everything." He stared into the flames. I can't picture you there. Can't see you in that life you left behind. Clara considered her answer carefully. I lived in my brother's house after my mother died. Large townhouse, good address, servants to do everything, social calls and tea parties, and endless, suffocating rules about what a proper lady could and couldn't do. Sounds comfortable. It was a cage. The words came out sharper than she'd intended. A gilded one, yes, but still a cage. Every choice made for me. Every thought I had measured against propriety. When I expressed interest in medicine, in learning real skills, I was told it was unseemly, unwomanly. When I studied anyway, in secret, I was made to feel like I was committing some terrible sin. Is that where you learned the veterinary medicine, in secret? Yes, there was a doctor, Dr. Morrison, who lived 3 streets over. He was old, eccentric, didn't care much for society's opinions. When he discovered I was reading his medical journals that I'd borrowed from his library, he offered to teach me properly. Clara smiled at the memory. My brother would have been horrified. A woman, studying anatomy and surgery, learning to handle blood and instruments. You're good at it, Ethan said. What you did with that mare, that wasn't just book learning, that was skill. Dr. Morrison said I had steady hands, a calm head in crisis. Clara held those hands up to the firelight, studying them. In Philadelphia, those talents were worthless. Here, they matter. They matter, Ethan agreed quietly. He was silent for a moment, then asked, Your brother, he was arranging a marriage? To a business associate, 63 years old, twice widowed, looking for a young wife to manage his household and bear his heirs. Clara's voice went flat. My brother thought it was an excellent match, financially advantageous. And you thought differently. I thought I'd rather die. She looked at Ethan directly. So when I saw your advertisement, I answered it. My brother tried to stop me, of course, threatened to disown me, said I was throwing away my life on frontier madness. Maybe you were, Ethan said, but there was no judgment in his tone, only curiosity. Maybe. Clara pulled the blanket tighter. But it's my life to throw away. My choice. That's worth everything I left behind. Ethan nodded slowly. I understand that. Choice. He stared into the fire for a long moment. I didn't choose this life. Was born into it. My father had this ranch, worked himself to death trying to make it profitable. Left it to me when I was 19. Been fighting to keep it ever since. 12 years, Clara said, remembering. 12 years of breaking my back, losing livestock, watching neighbors give up and move on. 12 years alone because I couldn't ask a woman to share this life. He laughed, a bitter sound. Then I got desperate enough to try anyway. Sent that advertisement expecting some desperate widow or homely farm girl who'd have nowhere else to go. And instead you got me. Yeah. Ethan turned to look at her fully. Instead I got you. City woman, educated. Pretty enough to have had real options. I spent the first week waiting for you to realize your mistake and leave. I don't make mistakes, Clara said. I make choices. I'm starting to see that. The wind screamed louder and something heavy, a branch maybe, or part of the barn, slammed against the cabin's exterior. Clara jumped. Ethan stood quickly, checking the windows, the door, making sure nothing had been breached. It's holding, he said finally. We're safe. But Clara heard the uncertainty beneath his words. They were safe for now. But this storm was just beginning, and they both knew it. They sat up most of the night, feeding the fire, listening to the wind try to tear their shelter apart. Sometime near dawn, Clara dozed off in her chair, exhausted beyond the point of staying awake. She woke to find herself covered with an additional blanket, the fire built high, and Ethan asleep in the other chair, his head tilted back at an angle that would leave his neck aching. The storm still raged outside, showing no signs of weakening. Clara stood carefully, her body stiff and protesting. She added wood to the fire, started coffee, tried to massage feeling back into her frozen feet. Through the window, she could see nothing but white. The world had disappeared. Ethan stirred, woke with a start. What time is it? Morning, I think. Hard to tell. He moved to the window, his face grave as he took in the continuing onslaught. This is worse than I thought. How much worse? This kind of storm, this much snow, this much wind, it can bury buildings, trap animals. If it doesn't break soon, he didn't finish the thought. They spent the day in tense waiting. The cabin grew colder despite their efforts. Ice formed on the inside of the windows. The wind never stopped, a constant assault that frayed nerves and made even simple conversation difficult over its roar. Clara cooked, cleaned, did anything to stay busy. Ethan checked and rechecked their supplies, reinforced weak points, paced like a caged animal. "How are Jack and Samuel?" Clara asked during a brief lull in the wind. "Can't check without going outside, but the bunkhouse is solid. They'll be cold but safe enough." "And the animals?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "No way to know." It was the not knowing that was hardest, Clara realized. Being trapped here, warm and relatively safe, while outside everything they'd worked for might be dying in the cold. The second night was worse than the first. The temperature plummeted so far that frost formed on the cabin's interior walls, despite the fire burning constantly. Clara wore every piece of clothing she owned and still shivered. "Come here," Ethan said finally, frustration in his voice. "We're wasting heat sitting apart." He was right. Clara moved to the chair beside him, and after a moment's awkward hesitation, Ethan put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her against his side. The warmth of his body was immediate and shocking. "Better?" he asked. "Much." Clara let herself lean into him, too cold and too tired to worry about propriety. "Thank you." They sat like that for hours, sharing warmth, watching the fire, listening to the storm try to kill them. Gradually, Clara felt Ethan's tension ease slightly. His breathing slowed. His arm around her shoulders became less rigid, more comfortable. "I was married before," he said suddenly, his voice quiet. "Did you know that?" Clara's breath caught. "No, you never mentioned—" "Her name was Sarah. We married young. She lasted 2 winters here." His voice was carefully empty of emotion. "Third winter, she got sick, fever. Started out small but got worse fast. I rode for the doctor, but the snow was too deep. By the time I got back, she was gone." "Ethan." Clara turned to look at him. "I'm so sorry." "It was 8 years ago." He stared into the fire. "I told myself I'd never ask another woman to share this life. That it wasn't fair. That I was better off alone. What changed? I got older, tireder, realized I couldn't do this forever by myself." He paused. "And I told myself that next time I'd marry someone practical, someone who understood hardship, someone who wouldn't break. Someone like the woman you expected from that advertisement." "Yeah." Ethan's arm tightened around her. "But I got you instead, and you're not what I expected in any way that matters." "Is that a complaint?" "No." His voice was rough. "It's not a complaint." They fell silent again, but something had shifted between them. Some wall had cracked. Clara felt it in the way Ethan held her, in the words he'd finally spoken, in the space between them that felt less like distance and more like possibility. The third day of the storm broke gray and vicious. The wind, if anything, had increased. Snow piled so high against the windows that they could no longer see out. The world had shrunk to this one room, this one fire, these 2 people trying to survive. Clara rationed their food carefully, made weak coffee stretch, melted snow for water when their supply ran low. Ethan split wood from their indoor stack, calculated how long their fuel would last, said nothing about the worry she could read in every line of his body. "We'll make it through," Clara said, as much to convince herself as to him. "Yeah," Ethan agreed, but he didn't sound certain. That night, huddled together against the cold, Clara asked the question that had been building in her mind. "If you could go back, if you could choose differently, would you still have sent that advertisement?" Ethan was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "A month ago I would have said I didn't know, that I'd made a mistake bringing you here, that you deserve better than this." He shifted slightly, and Clara felt his hand find hers beneath the blankets. "Now? I'd send it again. I'd choose this, choose you, even knowing it meant storms like this, even knowing it meant asking you to fight for survival in a place that wants us dead." Clara's heart hammered. "Why?" "Because you don't break, Clara. You bend and you adapt and you survive, but you don't break. Because you're here by choice, not by force, and that makes all the difference. Because he stopped, struggling with words. Because you make this life feel less like endurance and more like living. Clara turned to face him fully, and in the firelight his eyes were soft, unguarded in a way she'd never seen. I choose this too, she said quietly. I choose you. This life, this fight, all of it. For a moment they just looked at each other. Then Ethan's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb rough and warm against her cheek. I'm going to kiss you now, he said. If that's not what you want, say so. It's what I want. His kiss was gentle at first, tentative, as if he'd forgotten how or never fully learned. Clara kissed him back, her hands finding the front of his shirt, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, and she felt weeks of tension and restraint and careful distance finally break between them. When they pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. Been wanting to do that for weeks, he admitted. Only weeks? Clara smiled. I've been wanting it since you first looked at me like I might actually be capable of surviving here. He laughed, a real laugh, warm and surprised. You're a stubborn woman, Clara Cole. You're just now figuring that out? They stayed close, sharing warmth and kisses and quiet words until exhaustion finally pulled them both toward sleep. For the first time since their marriage, Ethan carried Clara to the bedroom, lay down beside her fully clothed on top of the blankets, and held her as they both succumbed to the kind of deep sleep that comes after days of relentless strain. The storm raged on outside, indifferent to their small human moment of connection. But inside, something had fundamentally changed. They were no longer strangers bound by contract. They were partners, allies, and maybe, just maybe, something more. Clara woke sometime in the deep night to a sound that wasn't wind, a crashing, splintering, something large breaking apart. Beside her, Ethan shot upright. The barn. He was out of bed and at the window before Clara could respond, scraping frost from the glass to peer out into the darkness. Can you see anything? Clara asked, joining him. No, too dark. Too much snow. But his body was rigid with tension. That sounded like structural damage. Could the horses? They're in the near barn. Should be safe if it's the hay barn that's gone. But uncertainty crept into his voice. Should be. They stood together in the darkness, listening, waiting. The wind shrieked, snow battered the walls, and somewhere out there, in the killing cold, part of their livelihood might be collapsing. We can't check until morning, Clara said, though it felt wrong. Cowardly. No, we can't. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. Jack was right. We go out there now, we die. Even if the barn is coming apart. Even if the animals need help. It was the hardest kind of choice. The kind where doing nothing was the only rational option, but every instinct screamed to act. They didn't sleep again that night. Just sat by the window, watching for the dawn, listening to every sound, wondering what they'd find when the storm finally broke. If it ever broke. Dawn came slowly, the darkness grudging every inch of gray light it surrendered. Clara and Ethan remained at the window, watching the world emerge from night into a landscape so transformed it might have been alien. Snow had buried everything, the fences, the path to the bunkhouse, the corrals, all of it hidden beneath drifts that reached halfway up the cabin walls. And the barn. The hay barn's roof had collapsed inward, timbers jutting like broken ribs through the white. Damn it, Ethan breathed. Whole season's hay is under that. Can it be salvaged? Maybe some, if we can dig it out before it rots. He pressed his palm against the cold glass. But that's not the worst of it. If the near barn has any damage, if the horses got out somehow. He didn't finish. Didn't need to. Clara understood. Horses loose in this storm wouldn't survive. Couldn't survive. The wind had finally begun to ease, though snow still fell steadily. Not the horizontal assault of the past 3 days, but thick, heavy flakes that added inches by the hour. I need to check the animals, Ethan said. See what we're dealing with. I'm coming with you. Clara, don't. She cut him off, her voice firm. Don't tell me to stay inside where it's safe. We're partners, remember? You check on things, I check on things. That's how this works. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, and she saw the war in his eyes, the instinct to protect battling against respect for her capability. Finally, he nodded. We go together. We stay roped together. And if I say we turn back, we turn back. No arguments. Agreed. They dressed in every layer they owned, wrapped cloth around their faces, tied a rope between them with 20 feet of slack. Ethan opened the door against the resistance of packed snow, and the cold hit Clara like a physical blow. It wasn't just cold. It was murderous, the kind of temperature that could freeze exposed skin in minutes. Stay close, Ethan shouted over the wind. Watch for drifts. They can be deeper than you think. The journey to the barn, normally a 2-minute walk, took 20. The snow came up to Clara's thighs in places, to her waist in the drifts. Every step was a fight. Her lungs burned with each breath of frigid air. Ice formed on her eyelashes, in her hair. But she kept moving, kept following Ethan's broad back, kept pushing forward. The near barn had held, thank the stars. When Ethan hauled the door open, Clara heard the most beautiful sound, horses nickering, moving, alive. They crowded inside, and the relative warmth of the barn felt like summer despite being well below freezing. Count them, Ethan ordered, moving down the line of stalls. Clara counted. Once, twice. Her heart sank. We're missing one, she said. Ethan's face went pale. Which one? The young stallion, the bay. Damn it, he was always the flighty one. Ethan checked the stalls again, as if hoping Clara had miscounted, but the empty stall confirmed it. He must have spooked when the hay barn collapsed, jumped the fence or broke through somehow. Can a horse survive out there? Not for long, not in this. Ethan's jaw clenched. Maybe he found shelter. Maybe he's hunkered down in the windbreak with the cattle. But his voice carried no conviction. They both knew what a spooked horse would do. Run. Keep running until it couldn't anymore. They checked the rest of the animals quickly. The cattle had survived in the windbreak, packed together for warmth, miserable but alive. The chickens were shockingly resilient, huddled in their reinforced coop. Everything else seemed to have weathered the storm. Everything except the stallion. We need to check on Jack and Samuel, Clara said as they stood in the barn, both of them shaking with cold despite their layers. The bunkhouse was closer, but the drifts between were treacherous. Twice Clara stumbled, and only the rope between them kept her from disappearing into the white. Ethan pulled her up both times without comment, but she felt his grip tighten on the rope, keeping her closer. Jack opened the door before they could knock, his weathered face creased with relief. Thank the stars, we saw you moving around and hoped you'd made it through. He pulled them inside where Samuel was stoking a small fire. How bad is it? Hay barn's gone, Ethan reported. Lost the young bay stallion. Everything else survived. Jack cursed quietly. That stallion was worth good money. I know. Ethan's voice was flat. But money doesn't matter if he's dead. I'm going to search for him once this lets up. You'll do no such fool thing, Jack said sharply. That horse ran off in a panic. Could be 5 miles away by now. Could be in a ravine. Could be anywhere. You go out searching in this, you'll die right alongside him. I can't just... You can, and you will. Jack's voice carried the authority of age and experience. I've seen men die for less. That horse is probably gone already, Ethan. Don't make your wife a widow over it. The word widow hung in the air. Clara saw Ethan flinch, saw the memory of Sarah cross his face. Jack's right, she said quietly. We can search when it's safe, but not now. Not yet. Ethan looked at her, and she saw the struggle in his eyes. The need to act warring against the knowledge that action would be suicide. Finally, his shoulders sagged. All right. We wait. They made it back to the cabin as the snow began to fall harder again. Inside, Clara's fingers and toes screamed as feeling returned to them. She'd never been this cold in her life, never understood that cold could be a kind of pain, relentless and all-consuming. Ethan built the fire high and made her sit close to it, chafing her hands between his own. You did good out there, he said. A lot of women would have panicked or slowed us down. I'm not a lot of women. No. His hand stilled on hers. You're really not. The storm continued for 2 more days, though with less violence than before. They fell into a rhythm of survival. rationing food, conserving fuel, checking on the animals in brief, dangerous excursions. The world beyond their small circle of warmth ceased to exist. On the sixth day, Clara woke to silence. She lay still for a moment, disoriented. Then she realized the wind had stopped. Completely. The constant howl that had been the soundtrack to their existence for nearly a week had simply ceased. Ethan. She shook his shoulder. They'd been sleeping in the same bed since that first kiss, finding warmth and comfort in each other. The storm. It's over. He came awake instantly, listening. Then he was up, at the window, scraping away frost. Stars above, he breathed. Clara, look! She joined him at the window and understood his awe. The world had been remade. Snow covered everything in smooth, pristine drifts that sparkled in the weak sunlight. The sky was painfully blue, cloudless, beautiful. And the silence was profound, not the absence of sound, but a deep, peaceful quiet that felt almost sacred. It's beautiful, Clara whispered. It's deadly. But Ethan's voice held wonder, too. All that snow, we'll be digging out for weeks, and the melt will flood everything come spring. But we survived. Yeah. He turned to her, and his hand found hers. We survived. They spent the morning assessing damage. The hay barn was a total loss, but Ethan thought they could salvage maybe a third of the hay if they worked fast. The fences would need extensive repair. Several of the smaller outbuildings had sustained damage, but the main structures, the barn, the cabin, the bunkhouse, had held. Could have been worse, Jack said as the four of them stood surveying the wreckage. Could have been a lot worse. Still missing the stallion, Samuel added quietly. Ethan's face hardened. I'm going to look for him, now that it's clear enough. You won't find him alive, Jack said. Not after 6 days in that cold. Then I'll find his body. I owe him that much. Ethan turned to Clara. I'll take Samuel with me. We'll search the most likely areas, the windbreak, the ravine, maybe the tree line. I'm coming too, Clara said. Clara, don't argue. 3 sets of eyes are better than 2. And if you do find him, if he's injured, you'll need someone who knows how to help. Ethan studied her face, then nodded slowly. All right, but we take it slow. The drifts are unstable, and there's no telling what's hidden under all that snow. They prepared carefully. Ropes, supplies, extra clothing. Jack stayed behind to start clearing the collapsed barn. The 3 of them set out into a landscape that was both beautiful and hostile, pristine white hiding countless dangers. They searched for hours, checked the windbreak where the cattle had sheltered, no sign of the stallion. Investigated the ravine where animals sometimes took refuge, found nothing but snow and ice. Moved through the tree line calling the horse's name, listening for any sound of response. Nothing. The sun was beginning to sink toward the horizon when Samuel spotted something. There, he said, pointing. That dark spot near the big pine. They moved closer, hope and dread mixing in equal measure. As they approached, the dark spot resolved into a shape Clara recognized. The stallion. Lying on its side. Not moving. No, Ethan breathed. He broke into a run, stumbling through the snow. Clara and Samuel followed, their hearts heavy. But as they reached the horse, Clara saw something that made her pulse jump. Wait, she said sharply. Look at his ribs. They all looked. The stallion's side moved. Barely, but it moved. He's alive, Clara whispered. Barely, but alive. She dropped to her knees beside the animal, her hands already moving over his body in assessment. The stallion was hypothermic, his breathing shallow, his heartbeat weak and irregular. Frost had formed on his muzzle and around his eyes, but he was breathing. How is that possible? Samuel asked, awe in his voice. He must have found shelter when the storm was at its worst. Maybe under this pine. The branches kept some of the snow off him. Clara's hands worked quickly, checking for injuries. He's got frostbite on his ears and lower legs, probably some internal damage from the cold, but he's alive. Can we save him? Ethan asked, and Clara heard the naked hope in his voice. I don't know, but we can try. She looked up at him. We need to get him back to the barn. Get him warm. It has to be slow. Warming him too fast could kill him. He's too weak to walk, Samuel observed. Then we'll pull him. Ethan was already fashioning a makeshift sled from rope and the blankets they'd brought. Help me get him on this. It took all three of them to maneuver the stallion onto the makeshift sled. The horse barely responded, too weak to fight or help. Clara's heart clenched. They were running out of time. The journey back was agonizing. The sled kept getting stuck in drifts. The rope cut into their shoulders. The stallion's breathing grew more labored with each passing minute. But they didn't stop. Couldn't stop. By the time they reached the barn, all three of them were shaking with exhaustion. Jack met them at the door, his eyes widening when he saw what they were dragging. "I'll be damned," he muttered. He actually made it. They got the stallion into a stall, surrounded him with the warmest blankets they had. Clara examined him more thoroughly now, her hands gentle but thorough. "His core temperature is dangerously low," she reported. "We need to warm him gradually. Blankets, warm water, body heat. Ethan, can you heat water? Not boiling, just warm enough to take the chill off." While Ethan worked, Clara stayed with the stallion, talking to him in a low, steady voice, willing him to hold on. Samuel brought more blankets. Jack stood by with supplies, ready to help however he could. "Why are you doing this?" Jack asked quietly. "Horse like this far gone. Most ranchers would put a bullet in him. Call it mercy." "Because he fought to survive," Clara said simply. "Because he made it through 6 days of hell when he should have died in 6 hours. That kind of will deserves a chance." Jack nodded slowly. "You're good people, Mrs. Cole. Both of you." Over the next hour, they worked to save the stallion's life. Clara poured warm water over his limbs carefully, bringing feeling back to frozen tissue. Ethan lay down beside the horse, sharing his body heat. Samuel kept the blankets coming, replaced them as they grew damp with melted snow. And slowly, impossibly, the stallion began to respond. His breathing deepened. His eyes, which had been glassy and unfocused, began to track movement. When Clara offered him water, he drank weakly. "He's coming back," Ethan said, wonder in his voice. "He's actually coming back." "Don't celebrate yet," Clara warned. "He's not out of danger. The frostbite could turn to infection. His lungs could be damaged from breathing frozen air. We'll need to watch him closely for days, maybe weeks." "But he has a chance." "Yes." Clara met Ethan's eyes across the stallion's prone body. "He has a chance." They took turns sitting with the horse through the night. Clara monitored his vital signs, changed his blankets, kept him warm. Ethan brought food and water, talked to the animal in the low, gentle voice he used with all the horses. Even Jack and Samuel stopped by to check on their unlikely patient. By morning, the stallion was strong enough to lift his head. By afternoon, he was trying to stand. "Easy," Clara murmured, steadying him as his legs shook with the effort. "You're not ready for that yet." But the horse was stubborn. He tried twice more before finally managing to stand on trembling legs, his breath coming in labored gasps, but his eyes bright with the will to live. Ethan stood beside Clara, watching with an expression she'd never seen on his face before. Pure, unguarded joy. "You did it," he said quietly. "You saved him." "We saved him," Clara corrected. "All of us." That night, as they lay together in bed, Ethan pulled Clara close. "I've been thinking," he said into the darkness, "about what you said. About choice." "What about it?" "When I married you, it was a choice made from desperation, from need. I needed a wife to help run this place, and you needed an escape from your old life." His arms tightened around her. "But somewhere along the way, that changed. It's not about need anymore." Clara's heart began to beat faster. "What is it about?" "It's about want. About choosing each other not because we have to, but because we want to." He shifted so he could see her face in the dim light. "I'm choosing you, Clara, not as a hired hand or a business partner, as my wife, as the woman I want to build a life with." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "I choose you too. I have been choosing you every day since I got here. Maybe even before that when I answered your advertisement." "Why?" The question was soft, vulnerable. "Why choose this life? Why choose me?" "Because you're real, Ethan. Because everything about this life is real. The hardship and the beauty and the struggle and the triumph. Because when I'm with you, I'm not performing some role society assigned me. I'm just me. She touched his face gently. And because somewhere between your doubt and my determination, I fell in love with you. She heard his breath catch. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, I love you too. Didn't want to, didn't plan to, but I do. They kissed then, and it was different from before. Not desperate or tentative, but certain. A promise. A choice made and affirmed. Later, as Clara drifted towards sleep, she thought about the stallion in the barn, about survival and will and the stubborn refusal to give up even when everything suggested you should. They were like that horse, she realized. She and Ethan both. Survivors, fighters, people who chose to keep going when the world wanted them dead. And together, they were stronger than either could have been alone. The weeks following the blizzard were consumed with recovery. They salvaged what hay they could from the collapsed barn, worked to repair fences and buildings, tended to animals that had survived but emerged weakened. The stallion improved slowly, his frostbitten ears healing to ragged stubs, his strength returning in gradual increments. He'll never be pretty again, Ethan said one morning, watching the horse move stiffly around his stall. Those ears, the scars from the frostbite, he's marked for life. Pretty doesn't matter, Claire replied. He survived. That's what matters. Winter deepened. More storms came, though none as severe as the first. Clara and Ethan faced them together, their partnership solidifying with each challenge overcome. Jack and Samuel watched the transformation with approval, the distance between employer and employee gradually giving way to something more like family. In late November, Clara woke feeling ill. She dismissed it as something she'd eaten, but when it continued for 3 days, she began to suspect something else. She counted back and felt her heart stop. It was possible. More than possible. She waited another week to be certain, and when her monthly cycle didn't come, she knew. The signs were all there, the nausea, the exhaustion, the tenderness in her breasts. She'd read enough medical texts to recognize what was happening. She was pregnant. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, hands pressed to her still flat stomach, and felt terror and joy in equal measure. A baby. Here, in this harsh land that had nearly killed them all just weeks ago. Clara? Ethan's voice came from the doorway. You all right? You've been in here a while. She looked up at him, and whatever he saw in her face made him cross the room quickly, kneeling before her. What's wrong? Are you sick? Did something happen? I'm pregnant, Clara said. The words felt strange in her mouth, real and terrifying and wonderful. Ethan froze. His eyes went wide, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Then, You're sure? As sure as I can be without a doctor's confirmation, but yes, I'm sure. He sat back on his heels, looking stunned. Clara's stomach twisted. Was he angry? Disappointed? They'd never discussed children, not really. It was mentioned in his original terms, but always as some distant eventuality, not an immediate reality. Say something, she whispered. I'm going to be a father. His voice was hoarse. We're going to have a baby. Yes. And then suddenly he was smiling. A real smile, bright and unguarded, transforming his usually stern face into something almost boyish. A baby, he repeated, and this time his voice carried wonder. Our baby. He pulled Clara into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. When he pulled back, there were tears in his eyes. I'm scared, he admitted. Sarah died in childbirth. I couldn't save her. What if... I'm not Sarah, Clara said firmly, and you're not alone this time. We'll prepare. We'll be careful, and we'll have help. There must be a midwife somewhere in this territory. Maggie Turner, Ethan said, the blacksmith's wife. She's delivered most of the babies in the area for the past 20 years. Then we'll ask for her help. Ethan nodded, but Clara could see the fear lingering in his eyes. The memory of loss. The terror of history repeating. She took his hands in hers. Listen to me. I'm strong, healthy. I have medical knowledge, and I have you. We're going to get through this together, just like we've gotten through everything else. Together, he echoed, and some of the fear in his eyes eased. They told Jack and Samuel that evening over dinner. Samuel whooped with joy. Jack grinned so wide his missing teeth showed. "About damn time this place had some young life in it," Jack said, raising his cup of coffee in a toast. "Congratulations to you both." The news spread through the sparse community quickly. When Clara and Ethan made their next trip to town, they were met with genuine warmth. Women Clara had spoken to only briefly now approached with advice and offers of help. Maggie Turner promised to ride out monthly to check on Clara's progress and be there for the birth. "You've earned your place here," Maggie said as they sat in the general store, surrounded by other ranch wives. "That business with the mare, surviving the blizzard, saving that stallion, people respect that. Respect you." Clara felt something warm bloom in her chest. Acceptance. She'd earned it through work and skill and sheer stubborn refusal to give up. Not through charm or social graces or any of the things that had mattered in Philadelphia. She'd earned it by being exactly who she was. Winter gave way slowly to early spring. The snow melted in fits and starts, turning the ranch into a muddy nightmare, but bringing with it the promise of renewal. Clara's belly began to swell, subtle at first but increasingly obvious. She continued working, more carefully now, but refusing to be treated as fragile. "You need to rest," Ethan argued after finding her mucking out stalls. "I need to stay strong, active. Sitting around won't help me or the baby. You're stubborn as that damn stallion. I'll take that as a compliment." They'd named the stallion Survivor, and he'd become something of a legend in the area. People rode out just to see the horse that had lived through 6 days of the worst blizzard in recent memory. His ragged ears and scars made him distinctive, a living testament to endurance. Much like Clara herself. By late spring, Clara's pregnancy was obvious to anyone with eyes. Her belly had grown round and prominent, the baby moving strongly inside her. Ethan had become almost comically protective, hovering whenever she did anything more strenuous than walking. "I'm pregnant, not dying," Clara said for what felt like the 100th time. "I know, but I worry." "Then worry quietly while I finish this mending." He smiled despite himself. "Yes, ma'am." Summer arrived with its own set of challenges. The heat made Clara's pregnancy more uncomfortable, her swollen feet aching, her back constantly sore. But the ranch thrived. They'd rebuilt the hay barn. The horses and cattle had produced strong young. Even the chickens seemed more productive than before. It was as if the ranch itself had survived its trial by fire, or rather, ice, and emerged stronger for it. In early August, Clara woke to the first contraction. It was a tightening, low and deep, that woke her just before dawn. Clara lay still, breathing through it, timing it instinctively. When it passed after 30 seconds, she waited, watched the sky lighten through the window, felt the life inside her shift and turn. Another contraction came 15 minutes later. Beside her, Ethan slept on, his face peaceful in a way it rarely was during waking hours. Clara studied him for a moment. This man who'd become her anchor, her partner, her love. In a few hours, their lives would change forever. The third contraction was stronger. Clara couldn't suppress the small sound that escaped her throat. Ethan's eyes opened immediately. "Clara, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. The baby's coming." She watched him process the words, saw the moment understanding hit. His face went pale, then flushed, then pale again. "Now? Right now?" "Not right this moment. But today, I think." Another contraction rolled through her and she gripped his hand. "We need to send Samuel for Maggie, and you need to breathe before you pass out." "I'm breathing. You're holding your breath." Ethan exhaled forcefully, then stood, running his hands through his hair. "Right. Samuel. Maggie. I'll get him riding now." "Ethan." Clara caught his hand before he could bolt from the room. "It's going to be all right. First babies take time. We have hours yet." Sarah's labor was fast, too fast. Clara pulled him down to sit beside her on the bed. "I'm not Sarah, and this isn't the same. I'm prepared. We're prepared. And Maggie will be here." He nodded, but she could see the fear in his eyes, the memory of loss that haunted him. She kissed him gently. "Trust me," she whispered. "I fought blizzards and saved dying horses and earned the respect of an entire frontier community. I can do this too." "I know you can." His voice was rough. "Doesn't mean I won't worry." "Then worry while you're getting Samuel." He kissed her forehead and left. Clara heard him moving through the cabin, heard the door open and close, heard his voice calling for Samuel. Within minutes, she heard hoofbeats heading toward town at a gallop. Jack appeared in the doorway, his weathered face uncertain. "Mr. Cole says the baby's coming, says I should help however you need." "Thank you, Jack. Could you heat water, a lot of it, and make sure we have clean cloths, towels, sheets, anything soft?" "Yes, ma'am." He paused. "You scared?" Clara considered lying, then decided against it. "Terrified. But I'm doing it anyway." Jack's face softened. "That's the bravest kind of courage there is." The contractions continued through the morning, growing gradually stronger and closer together. Ethan stayed close, his presence both comforting and anxious. He paced, fetched things, checked on the heated water every 5 minutes. "You're making me dizzy," Clara said finally, half amused and half exasperated. "Sit down before you wear a hole in the floor." "I can't sit. I need to do something." "Then hold my hand and tell me about the ranch. What needs doing this week? What your plans are for fall." He looked at her like she was insane. "You want to talk about ranch business? Now? I want to be distracted." Another contraction hit, stronger than the others. Clara breathed through it, squeezing Ethan's hand hard enough to make him wince. When it passed, she managed, "And you need to be distracted too, so talk." So he talked. About the fence that needed mending in the south pasture. About the new foals and which ones showed promise for training. About his plans to expand the herd come spring. His voice was a steady anchor as the contractions grew stronger as the morning wore into afternoon. Maggie arrived just after noon, her experienced eyes taking in the situation immediately. "How far apart are they?" she asked, setting down her bag. "About 7 minutes now," Clara reported. "They've been getting closer for the past hour." "Good. That's good progress for a first baby." Maggie washed her hands thoroughly, then examined Clara with gentle efficiency. "You're doing well, Mrs. Cole. Still got some ways to go, but everything looks as it should." "How long?" Ethan asked. "Could be hours yet. Could be longer." Maggie's tone was matter-of-fact. "First babies take their time. Nothing to do but be patient." Patience had never been Ethan's strength. He continued to hover, to pace, to jump at every sound Clara made. Finally, Maggie took pity on him. "Mr. Cole, why don't you go check on your livestock, make sure everything's settled for the day? This is going to be a long process, and you'll wear yourself out if you keep this up." "I'm not leaving her." "I'm not asking you to leave. I'm asking you to step out for an hour. Give yourself and your wife a break from each other." When Ethan looked like he might argue, Maggie added firmly, "I've been doing this for 20 years. She's in good hands." Ethan looked at Clara, who nodded. "Go. I'll be fine." He left reluctantly, and Clara could hear him just outside the cabin, clearly not going far. Maggie chuckled. "He's a good man. Terrified, but good. He lost his first wife in childbirth." "I remember. I was there." Maggie's face grew somber. "Sarah was a sweet girl, but she was delicate. Had complications from the start. This is different. You're strong, healthy, and you've got knowledge most women don't have." "I hope that's enough." "It will be." Maggie checked the supplies Jack had laid out, nodded in approval. "You've prepared well. Now we just wait and let your body do what it's designed to do." The afternoon stretched long. The contractions intensified, coming faster, lasting longer. Clara walked when she could, breathed through each wave of pain, refused to let fear take hold. Ethan returned and stayed close, his hand a steady presence in hers. By evening, the contractions were coming hard and fast, barely 2 minutes apart. Clara's world had narrowed to pain and breath, and the monumental effort of bringing new life into existence. "You're doing beautifully," Maggie encouraged. "Won't be long now." But long is relative. Another hour passed, then another. The pain became all-consuming, a force that swept through Clara in relentless waves. She heard herself making sounds she'd never made before, primal, raw, stripped of all pretense. "I can't," she gasped during a brief respite. "I can't do this." "You can," Ethan said fiercely, his face close to hers. "You're the strongest person I know. You survived a blizzard. You saved a dying horse. You can do this." "That was different." "No, it's the same. It's you refusing to give up. It's you fighting through impossible odds. You've done it before. You'll do it again. Another contraction hit, and Clara screamed. She was past caring about dignity, past caring about anything except the overwhelming need to push, to get this baby out, to end this impossible ordeal. That's it, Maggie said. When the next one comes, push with everything you have. Clara pushed and pushed and pushed. The pain was beyond anything she'd imagined, beyond anything she'd read about in her medical texts. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. I see the head, Maggie announced. One more big push, Mrs. Cole. Give me everything. Clara gathered every ounce of strength she had left, every bit of will and determination and stubborn refusal to fail. She pushed with a force that felt like it might split her in two. And suddenly, blessedly, the pressure released. A baby's cry filled the room, thin and wavering at first, then stronger, more insistent. It's a girl, Maggie said, her voice warm with satisfaction. A beautiful, healthy girl. Clara collapsed back against the pillows, shaking with exhaustion and relief and overwhelming emotion. Ethan's face appeared above hers, tears streaming down his cheeks. You did it, he whispered. You did it. Maggie worked quickly, cleaning the baby, checking her over with practiced hands. Then she wrapped the tiny form in a clean blanket and placed her in Clara's arms. Clara looked down at her daughter and felt her heart expand in a way she hadn't known was possible. The baby was small, wrinkled, covered in vernix and blood, and absolutely perfect. Hello, little one, Clara whispered. We've been waiting for you. The baby's eyes opened, dark and unfocused, but searching. One tiny hand escaped the blanket, fingers spreading and curling. Ethan reached out tentatively, and those fingers wrapped around his thumb with surprising strength. She's so small, he breathed. She's perfect, Clara corrected. Maggie finished her work, cleaning up efficiently. Everything looks good. You did excellent work, Mrs. Cole. And this little girl is as healthy as they come. Strong grip, good color, breathing well. She's a fighter, this one. Like her mother, Ethan said, not taking his eyes off the baby. The hours that followed blurred together. Maggie showed Clara how to nurse, supervised the first feeding, made sure both mother and baby were settling well. Jack and Samuel peeked in briefly, their rough faces softening at the sight of the tiny newcomer. She's a beauty, Jack said gruffly. Going to be a heartbreaker, that one. She's going to be strong, Clara said. Strong enough to survive this life. With you two as parents? No doubt about that. As night fell, Maggie prepared to leave. I'll be back tomorrow to check on you both. In the meantime, rest when she rests. Let your husband help and don't try to do too much too fast. I'll make sure she rests, Ethan promised. After Maggie left, Ethan climbed carefully onto the bed beside Clara and their daughter. The three of them lay there in the lamplight, a family now, complete in a way that went beyond legal documents or practical arrangements. What should we name her? Clara asked. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, studying the baby's tiny features. I keep thinking about that blizzard, about how close we came to losing everything, about how we fought through it and survived. Hope, Clara said suddenly. We should name her Hope, because that's what she represents, the belief that good things can come from hardship, that we can build something beautiful even in the harshest conditions. Hope. Ethan tested the name, then smiled. Hope Cole, I like it. The baby, Hope, made a small sound and they both looked down at her. Her eyes were closed now, her breathing even and peaceful. She had no idea how hard-won her existence was, how many trials her parents had faced to bring her into this world. But she would learn. They would teach her about strength and resilience and the power of choosing your own path. Teach her that circumstances didn't define you, your response to them did. Clara felt Ethan's arm around her shoulders, felt the weight of her daughter in her arms, and thought about the journey that had brought her here. From Philadelphia's suffocating propriety to Montana's brutal freedom, from a desperate advertisement to genuine love, from strangers bound by contract to partners bound by choice. I never imagined this, she said quietly. When I answered your advertisement, I never imagined I'd be this happy. Neither did I. Ethan pressed a kiss to her temple. I thought I was getting a ranch hand, Got a partner instead. Got love. Got family. No regrets? Not a single one. He paused. You? Clara looked around the small bedroom, rough walls, simple furniture, a far cry from Philadelphia's luxury. But it was hers. Built by her own hands and choices and stubborn will. Not one, she confirmed. They stayed like that through the night, taking turns holding hope, marveling at her tiny perfection, learning the new rhythms of life with a baby. It was exhausting and overwhelming and utterly wonderful. Dawn came slowly, painting the Montana sky in shades of pink and gold. Clara stood at the window, Hope sleeping in her arms, and watched the ranch wake up. Jack emerging from the bunkhouse to start morning chores, the horses moving in the corral. Survivor standing proud despite his scarred ears, a testament to endurance. Ethan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around both of them. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking about the advertisement, about how it promised hardship, brutal conditions, survival." She smiled. "It didn't mention any of this, the beauty, the community, the love." "False advertising?" "The best kind." They stood together as the sun rose fully, flooding the land with light. This harsh, beautiful, unforgiving place that had tested them and shaped them and made them stronger than they'd ever been apart. The first weeks with Hope were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings and learning to navigate the new reality of parenthood. Clara recovered slowly but surely, her body healing, her strength returning. Ethan proved surprisingly adept with the baby, his large hands gentle as he changed diapers and soothed cries. The ranch community rallied around them. Maggie visited regularly, bringing supplies and advice. The women from town stopped by with food and hand-sewn baby clothes. Even the rough ranchers who'd initially doubted Clara now tipped their hats with respect. She'd proven herself beyond any question, not just as a capable worker or skilled healer, but as someone who belonged here, who'd earned her place through competence and courage. As summer faded into fall, life settled into a new rhythm. Clara balanced motherhood with ranch work, refusing to be relegated to just domestic duties. She'd strap Hope to her chest in a sling Maggie had made and work in the garden, check on the animals, help with the endless tasks that kept a ranch running. "You're going to spoil that baby," Jack teased one afternoon, watching Clara nurse Hope while simultaneously organizing the tack room. "Impossible to spoil an infant with love," Clara replied, "and she needs to see what work looks like. She'll be part of this ranch soon enough. She's not even 3 months old. Never too early to learn." The harvest came, and with it, hard work bringing in hay and preparing for winter. This time, Clara knew what to expect. This time, they were ready. In late October, the first serious cold snap hit. Clara woke to frost on the windows and immediately thought of the blizzard from the year before. But this time was different. The barns were reinforced. The hay was properly stored. They had systems in place, lessons learned from nearly dying. "We're ready this time," Ethan said, echoing her thoughts as they secured the last of the winter preparations. "We are," Clara agreed. "Whatever comes, we're ready." That night, as they sat by the fire with Hope sleeping in a cradle Ethan had built, Clara reflected on how much had changed in barely more than a year. She'd arrived as a stranger, untested and uncertain. She'd been forged by hardship into someone she barely recognized, stronger, harder, more capable than she'd ever been. But not just harder, also softer in ways that mattered, open to love, willing to trust, able to build connections instead of just maintaining appearances. "What are you smiling about?" Ethan asked. "Everything. This life. This family. How far we've come. We've got a long way to go still. This life doesn't get easier." "I know." Clara reached for his hand. "But we'll face it together. Whatever comes, blizzards, drought, hard winters, difficult births, we'll face it together." "Together," Ethan echoed. And there was promise in the word, commitment. November brought the first real test of the season, a storm that, while not as severe as the previous year's blizzard, still tested their preparations. This time, they weathered it easily. The animals stayed safe. The buildings held. They spent 3 days snowed in, but with adequate supplies and no panic. See, Clara said as the storm cleared. We learned. We survived, Ethan corrected. We learned and we survived. It became their mantra: learn and survive, adapt and endure. Face each challenge not with fear, but with preparation and partnership. As winter deepened, Clara began teaching Hope things, even though the baby was too young to understand. She'd hold her while checking the horses, explaining what she was looking for in their eyes, their breathing, their movement. She'd describe the Montana landscape, paint pictures with words of the mountains and sky and endless plains. She can't understand you, Ethan pointed out. Not yet, but she will. And when she does, I want her to know this place, to love it the way we do. The way you do, you mean? I was born here. You chose it. We both choose it, Clara said firmly. Every day we stay, we're choosing this life, this place, each other. The winter passed more easily than the previous one. They'd learned to read the weather, to prepare for the worst, to find joy in the small victories. A healthy calf born in the snow. A fence repaired before it completely collapsed. Bread that rose perfectly despite the cold. Spring arrived with its usual drama, rapid snowmelt that flooded the low areas, mud that made every task 3 times harder, animals emerging from winter lean and eager. But it also brought renewal, green shoots pushing through dead grass, foals and calves taking their first wobbling steps, Hope reaching new milestones, smiling, laughing, reaching for things with increasing coordination. She's growing so fast, Clara said one evening, watching Hope attempt to roll over. She's strong, like her mother. Stubborn, you mean? That too. Summer came again, and with it, new challenges and new triumphs. The ranch continued to grow. They purchased more horses, expanded the herd. Samuel proved himself capable enough that Ethan began training him to take on more responsibility. In late summer, Clara discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the news brought less fear and more joy. They knew what to expect now, knew they could handle it. Hope would be a little over a year old when the new baby arrived, young but old enough that Clara felt capable of managing both. A whole passel of children, Ethan said, grinning at the news. Going to fill this cabin up. We'll build more rooms. Expand. Clara rested her hand on her still flat stomach. We'll make it work. We always do. The community continued to embrace them. Clara's medical skills became known throughout the region. People began riding out to ask for her help with sick animals, difficult births, injuries. She never refused, even when it meant long rides in bad weather or working through the night. You're building a reputation, Maggie said approvingly. People trust you. That's worth more than gold out here. I just do what needs doing. That's exactly why they trust you. As fall approached again, Clara stood on the porch one evening, Hope toddling around her feet, and surveyed the ranch. It had changed so much in 2 years. New buildings, healthy animals, fences that stood straight, gardens that produced abundantly. But more than the physical changes, the ranch felt different. It felt like home. Not just a place to survive, but a place to thrive, to build a life worth living. Ethan came up behind her, his arms wrapping around her expanding waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. Happy? He asked. Clara thought about the question, about happiness measured not in comfort or luxury, but in purpose and partnership and the bone-deep satisfaction of work well done. Yes, she said simply, I'm happy. Hope grabbed onto Clara's skirt, pulling herself up, babbling in her nonsensical baby language. She had Ethan's gray eyes and Clara's stubborn chin. She was fearless, curious, constantly getting into things she shouldn't. She was perfect. I keep thinking about that advertisement, Clara said, about how it promised nothing but hardship. Having regrets? Never. I'm just thinking about how the hardship made everything else more meaningful. The joy is sweeter because we know what it costs. The love is stronger because we chose it deliberately. The life we've built matters because we built it ourselves. From nothing. Ethan turned her to face him. You built more than a life, Clara. You built a home, a family. You turned a desperate arrangement into something real. We did that. Together. Together, he agreed and kissed her. Hope squealed with delight, and they both laughed. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. It always did. But they'd face them the same way they'd faced everything else. With strength, with partnership, with the stubborn refusal to give up that had brought them this far and would carry them forward. The Montana frontier had tested them, had tried to break them, had thrown everything it could at their fragile beginning. But they'd survived. More than survived. They'd thrived. And as Clara stood there with her husband's arms around her, her daughter at her feet, and new life growing inside her, she knew with absolute certainty that she'd made the right choice. Not the easy choice, not the comfortable choice, but the right one. The choice to build a life on her own terms, to forge partnership from practicality and love from necessity. To prove that strength wasn't just enduring hardship, but finding joy and purpose despite it. The ranch stretched out before them in the fading light, rough and beautiful and utterly theirs. Built by choice, sustained by will, made meaningful by love. And that, Clara thought, was worth every trial they'd faced. Worth everything. The second pregnancy proved harder than the first. Clara's body, still recovering from Hope's birth and worn down by the relentless demands of ranch life, protested more vocally this time. Morning sickness stretched into afternoon and evening sickness. Her back ached constantly. Her ankles swelled despite the cooler autumn temperatures. But she refused to slow down. "You're pushing too hard," Ethan said one October morning, finding her hauling water buckets when she should have been resting. "The animals need water regardless of how I feel. Samuel can do that. Jack can do that. I can do that." He took the buckets from her hands firmly. "You need to take care of yourself and the baby. I am taking care of us. By keeping this ranch running." "Clara," his voice carried a note of frustration she rarely heard. "You're not invincible. I know you want to be, but you're not. And if something happens to you because you were too stubborn to accept help..." He stopped, his jaw working. "I can't lose you. I won't." The raw fear in his voice made Clara pause. She'd been so focused on proving her strength, on not being weak, that she hadn't considered how her refusal to rest might be affecting him. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "You're right. I've been pushing too hard." Relief flooded his face. "Thank you. Now please, go sit down, read to Hope, rest. Let us handle the heavy work for a while." Clara nodded, and as she made her way back to the cabin, she realized something important. Accepting help wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. She'd learned to survive the frontier's physical challenges, but she was still learning the subtler lesson of letting others share the burden. Hope was playing on the floor with wooden blocks Ethan had carved, babbling her increasingly complex nonsense. At 14 months, she was walking now, getting into everything, a whirlwind of curiosity and determination. "Just like your mother," Ethan often said, half exasperated and half proud. Clara settled into the rocking chair and watched her daughter play. Hope had Ethan's concentration, his intensity when focused on a task. But she had Clara's stubborn refusal to give up when something didn't work the way she wanted. "Come here, little one," Clara called. Hope toddled over, climbing into Clara's lap with the confidence of a child who'd never known anything but unconditional love. Clara held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her small body. This was what mattered. Not proving she could do everything alone, not maintaining some impossible standard of strength. This child, this family, this life they'd built together. The baby inside her kicked hard, as if in agreement. Winter came early that year, catching them in mid-November with a snowstorm that blanketed the ranch overnight. But this time, they were prepared. More than prepared. They'd learned from experience, planned for the worst, built systems that could withstand whatever Montana threw at them. The storm lasted 3 days, but there was no panic, no desperate scrambling, just methodical work, checking the animals, maintaining the fires, waiting it out with patience born of experience. "Remember 2 years ago?" Clara asked on the third night, watching snow pile against the windows. "How terrified we were." "I remember thinking we might die," Ethan said, "thinking I'd made a terrible mistake bringing you here. And now? Now I know we can handle anything." He pulled her close, careful of her swollen belly. "Because we've already survived the worst." But the worst, it turned out, was still ahead. Clara's labor started on a bitter January night with a blizzard building on the horizon. She'd been feeling odd all day, restless, uncomfortable, unable to settle. When the first contraction hit during dinner, she knew immediately this would be different from Hope's birth. The pain was sharper, more intense, and the contractions were coming faster than they should this early. "Send for Maggie," she told Ethan, trying to keep her voice calm. "Now." He didn't argue, didn't ask questions, just grabbed his coat and headed for the door. "Samuel!" she heard him shout. "I need you to ride to town. Get Mrs. Turner. Tell her it's urgent." Samuel must have heard the fear in Ethan's voice because within minutes, Clara heard hoofbeats racing away into the gathering storm. "How bad is it?" Ethan asked, returning to her side. "I don't know." Clara gripped the edge of the table as another contraction hit, harder than the last. "Something's different. Wrong." The word hung between them. Wrong. The thing every woman feared in childbirth, the thing that had killed Sarah. Over the next hour, the contractions intensified beyond what Clara remembered from Hope's birth. The pain was crushing, relentless, giving her almost no time to breathe between waves. And there was something else, a wrongness she couldn't quite identify but felt deep in her bones. Jack came to watch Hope, his weathered face tight with worry as he carried the confused toddler to the bunkhouse. "You fight, Mrs. Cole," he said gruffly. "You hear me? You fight!" The storm hit in full force just as Samuel returned with Maggie. The midwife burst through the door, snow-covered and breathing hard, her experienced eyes taking in the situation immediately. "How far apart?" she asked, already washing her hands. "Less than 2 minutes," Claire gasped through another contraction. "And they're getting worse." Maggie examined her quickly, and Clara saw her face tighten. "The baby's breech. That's why the pain is so intense." Ethan, standing by the door, went pale. "What does that mean?" "It means the baby's positioned wrong, coming feet first instead of head first." Maggie's voice was calm but serious. "We need to try to turn it. Mrs. Cole, this is going to hurt." "Do it," Clara said through gritted teeth. "Whatever you need to do." What followed was agony beyond anything Clara had experienced. Maggie's hands working inside her, trying to manipulate the baby into the correct position. Clara screamed, the pain so intense she thought she might lose consciousness. Ethan held her hands, his face anguished, tears streaming down his cheeks. "I can't," Clara gasped. "I can't." "You can," Ethan said fiercely. "You survived a blizzard that should have killed us. You saved a dying horse. You fought for everything we have. You can do this." "The baby won't turn," Maggie said grimly. "It's going to have to come as is. Mrs. Cole, I need you to listen carefully. This is going to be difficult, more difficult than Hope's birth. But I've delivered breech babies before, and with your strength and my experience, we can do this." "Tell me what to do," Clara said. "When I say push, you push with everything you have. But you have to listen to me between contractions. If I tell you to stop, you stop. We have to be careful not to damage the baby coming through." The next hours were a nightmare. Push, stop, breathe, push again. The baby's feet emerged first, then legs, impossibly tiny and fragile. Clara could see them, could see her child being born in the wrong direction, and fear threatened to overwhelm her. "Stay with me," Maggie commanded. "The hardest part is still ahead. The head is the largest part. We need to get it through without the cord getting compressed." Clara pushed and pushed and pushed. Somewhere in the background, she was aware of the storm raging outside, wind screaming against the cabin walls. The two battles, the one inside her body and the one outside, seemed to mirror each other in their violence. "I see the shoulders," Maggie said. "One more big push, Mrs. Cole. Give me everything." Clara gathered every ounce of strength she had, every bit of will that had carried her through 2 years of frontier hardship, every moment of stubborn determination that had defined her life since leaving Philadelphia. She pushed with a force that felt like it was tearing her apart. And then, suddenly, the baby was out. But there was no cry, no sound at all. Clara's heart stopped. Maggie worked frantically, clearing the baby's airways, rubbing its chest, her face tight with concentration. "Come on," the midwife muttered. "Come on, little one. Breathe." Ethan's hand was crushing Clara's. Neither of them breathed, both frozen in terror as Maggie worked. Then Clara remembered the foal that wouldn't breathe, remembered what she'd done. "Give her to me," she said. "Mrs. Colt, now!" Maggie hesitated only a second before placing the tiny, still form in Clara's arms. Clara bent over her daughter. She could see it was a girl, and covered the baby's nose and mouth with her own. She breathed, once, twice, 3 times. "Please," she whispered between breaths. "Please, please, please." A shudder ran through the tiny body, then a cough, then a thin, wavering wail that was the most beautiful sound Clara had ever heard. The baby cried, loud and indignant and absolutely perfect. Clara collapsed back, shaking with exhaustion and relief and overwhelming emotion. Tears streamed down her face as Maggie quickly checked the baby over. "She's breathing well now. Color's good. Heart rate is strong." Maggie's voice was thick with emotion. "You did it, Mrs. Cole. You both did it." Ethan was crying openly, his hand trembling as he reached out to touch his daughter's tiny fist. "She's so small," he whispered. "She's perfect," Clara corrected, the same word she'd said about Hope. "She's perfect." Maggie finished her work, cleaned the baby, wrapped her in blankets. "I've never seen anything like that," she said quietly. "That breathing technique, where did you learn it?" "From saving a dying horse," Clara said, looking down at her daughter. "Turns out the same principles work." The baby, they named her Grace, for the mercy of her survival, was smaller than Hope had been, more fragile. The difficult birth had taken its toll on both mother and child, but she was alive, fighting, determined to survive, just like her mother. The recovery was harder this time. Claire had torn badly during the birth. An infection set in, despite Maggie's best efforts. For 3 days, Clara burned with fever while Ethan sat vigil beside her bed, tending both her and the baby, his face haggard with fear. "Don't you dare leave me," he whispered on the 3rd night, when her fever spiked dangerously high. "You don't get to survive everything we've been through just to die from this. You hear me, Clara? You don't get to leave." Clara heard him through the fever haze, felt his hand gripping hers, and she chose, once again, to fight. On the 4th day, the fever broke. Clara woke weak but clear-headed to find Ethan asleep in the chair beside her bed, Grace cradled carefully in his arms. "Ethan," she croaked. His eyes snapped open. "Clara, thank the stars you're awake. How do you feel?" "Like I got trampled by the entire herd." She managed a weak smile. "But alive." He started crying again, silently, tears streaming down his face. "I thought I'd lost you. The fever. Maggie said if it didn't break soon. But it did. I'm here. We're both here." He carefully placed Grace in her arms, and Clara looked down at her daughter. The baby was sleeping peacefully, her tiny face serene. She had dark hair like Hope, but where Hope's features were strong and defined, Grace's were delicate, almost ethereal. "She's beautiful," Clara whispered. "She's like you, a fighter." Ethan's hand touched Grace's head gently. "She wasn't breathing, and you refused to accept it. You brought her back, just like you brought that stallion back. Just like you keep bringing me back from giving up." Clara looked at him. This man who'd ordered a wife out of desperation and gotten a partner instead. This man who'd learned to trust, to love, to build something beautiful from necessity. "We bring each other back," she said. "That's what partnership means." The weeks following Grace's birth were a test of everything they'd built. She recovered slowly, unable to do the heavy work she'd insisted on before. Grace was a fussy baby, colicky, and difficult in a way Hope had never been. The ranch work continued regardless, demanding attention whether they had energy to give it or not. But they managed. Ethan took on more of the household duties without complaint. Jack and Samuel stepped up, handling the ranch work with increasing competence. Hope, not quite understanding her new sister but sensing the need to be good, became surprisingly helpful in small ways. And the community rallied. Women Clara barely knew brought food, offered to watch Hope, helped with cleaning and laundry. Maggie visited daily for the first 2 weeks, monitoring both mother and baby. "You've built something here," Maggie said one afternoon, watching Hope play while Grace nursed. "Not just a ranch, a real community. People care about you, about your family." "I never expected that," Clara admitted. "When I came here, I thought it would just be survival, work and hardship and fighting to get by." That's part of it, but it's not all of it. Maggie smiled. You gave people something to believe in, a woman who could do anything a man could do and some things better. Someone who didn't just survive but thrived. That matters out here. As winter gave way to spring, Clara regained her strength gradually. Grace became less fussy, her smiles more frequent. Hope continued to grow, her vocabulary expanding daily, her personality emerging strong and opinionated. She's going to be a handful when she's older, Ethan said one evening, watching Hope argue with her reflection in the window. She already is a handful, Clara laughed, but I wouldn't have her any other way. The ranch continued to prosper. Word of Clara's medical skills had spread far beyond their immediate community. People traveled from neighboring territories seeking her help with difficult animal births, injuries, illnesses. She never refused, though she was more careful now about her own limitations. You've become the closest thing to a doctor this area has, a rancher from 50 miles east said, after Clara saved his prize bull from a twisted gut. We're lucky to have you. Clara didn't feel lucky. She felt purposeful. Every skill she'd learned in secret back in Philadelphia, every bit of knowledge she'd accumulated, mattered here, made a difference, saved lives. This was what she'd been looking for without knowing it, not just escape from constraint, but purpose beyond decoration. Summer brought its own challenges. A drought threatened the grazing land. Prices for horses dropped as other ranches struggled. One of Jack's relatives died, and he took a month to travel back east for the funeral, leaving them short-handed. But they adapted. They always adapted. That was the lesson Clara had learned. Survival wasn't about avoiding hardship, but learning to bend without breaking, to find solutions instead of giving up. In late summer, a letter arrived from Philadelphia. Clara's brother, writing after 2 years of silence. She opened it with trembling hands, unsure what to expect. The letter was brief and stiff, but the meaning was clear. Her brother was dying. Cancer. The doctors gave him months at most. He wanted to see her, to make amends before the end. Clara sat at the kitchen table for a long time, the letter in her hands, emotions warring inside her. Anger at the years of control and dismissal. Sadness at the severed connection. Uncertainty about what, if anything, she owed him now. What do you want to do? Ethan asked gently. I don't know. Clara looked up at him. Part of me wants to ignore this, to let him face death the way he forced me to face his control, alone. And the other part? The other part remembers that he raised me after our parents died, that he wasn't all bad, just limited, unable to see beyond the narrow world he knew. She folded the letter carefully. And that part wants to say goodbye. Then we'll make it work. You can take the train back, spend some time with him. I can manage here with Jack and Samuel. Clara shook her head. No. If I go, we all go. You, me, Hope, Grace. We're a family. We do this together. The trip to Philadelphia was an undertaking that required weeks of planning. They left the ranch in Jack and Samuel's capable hands, packed enough supplies for a month away, and boarded the train east with 2 small children and considerable trepidation. The journey was exhausting. Hope was fascinated by everything, asking endless questions. Grace fussed and cried, disturbed by the unfamiliar surroundings. But they managed, trading off childcare responsibilities, supporting each other through the long days of travel. Philadelphia, when they arrived, was exactly as Clara remembered and utterly foreign. The cobblestone streets felt too narrow after Montana's open spaces. The buildings pressed in from all sides. The crowds were suffocating. How did you live here? Ethan asked, looking around with barely concealed horror. I survived here, Clara corrected. I lived in Montana. Her brother's townhouse was the same. Ornate, expensive, meticulously maintained. A servant answered the door, led them to the parlor, went to fetch her brother. When he appeared, Clara barely recognized him. The robust man she remembered had been reduced to a gaunt shadow, his skin gray, his movements painfully slow. But his eyes were the same, sharp and assessing. Clara, his voice was rough. You came. You asked me to. He looked at Ethan, at the children, at Clara's simple but sturdy traveling clothes. You look different, harder. I am different, stronger. I can see that. He gestured to chairs. Please, sit. Tell me about this life you chose. And so Clara did. She told him about the ranch, about the blizzard that nearly killed them, about saving horses and delivering babies and building a life from nothing. She told him about Ethan's initial doubts and her stubborn determination, about community earned through competence and respect gained through skill. She told him in essence that she'd been right to leave, that the life she'd built was worth more than all of Philadelphia's gilded cages. Her brother listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. I was wrong, he said finally, about the marriage I tried to arrange, about dismissing your interests, about thinking you needed protection instead of freedom. He paused, coughing. I thought I was doing what was best for you. I see now I was only doing what was easiest for me. Why are you telling me this now? Clara asked. Because I'm dying, and I want you to know that I see it, see what you've built, who you've become. His eyes moved to Ethan. You take care of her? She takes care of herself, Ethan replied. I just try to keep up. Her brother smiled faintly. Good answer. He looked back at Clara. I'm leaving you the house, and a sum of money, not as recompense. Nothing could repay what I tried to force you into. But as acknowledgement. You earned your own way. This is just support for your children's future. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. You don't have to. I do. Let me do this one thing right before I go. They stayed in Philadelphia for 3 weeks. Clara visited her brother daily, sometimes bringing the children, sometimes alone. They talked about the past, about their parents, about the choices that had brought them to this moment. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. The hurt was too deep for that. But it was understanding, closure. When her brother died on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, Clara sat beside his bed and felt a complicated grief for the relationship they'd never quite had, for the man he might have been if he'd been capable of seeing beyond society's narrow expectations, but also gratitude, because his control had pushed her to seek escape, and that escape had led her to everything that mattered now. After the funeral, after settling the estate matters, Clara stood in the townhouse that was now hers and felt nothing but eagerness to leave. We could stay, Ethan said. Live here. The money your brother left. We could sell the ranch, raise the children in comfort. Clara looked at him sharply. Is that what you want? I want you to be happy and safe and not worn down by hardship. Ethan Cole, look at me. Clara waited until he met her eyes. I am happy. I am safe, safer than I ever was in this gilded prison, and I'm not worn down by hardship. I'm strengthened by purpose. Montana is our home, our life. I don't want comfort. I want meaning. Relief flooded his face. Thank goodness, because I couldn't imagine living here. I'd suffocate in a week. They sold the townhouse, kept a modest sum for emergencies, and invested the rest back into the ranch. Then they boarded the train home, eager to return to the life they'd built. Montana welcomed them back with a late autumn storm and a crisis. Several cattle had gotten sick while they were gone, and Samuel had been managing as best he could, but was overwhelmed. Clara jumped immediately into action, examining the cattle, diagnosing the illness, setting up a treatment plan. Ethan worked alongside her, just as he always had. Hope helped by bringing supplies. Grace slept in a sling on Clara's back. Good to have you back, Mrs. Cole, Jack said, relief evident in his voice. Place wasn't the same without you. Good to be back, Clara replied, and meant it with every fiber of her being. The years that followed brought their share of challenges, droughts and early freezes, economic downturns and sick livestock, the endless grinding work of keeping a ranch running. Grace proved as strong-willed as her sister, and the two girls fought and played with equal intensity. 2 more children followed, a son named James and another daughter named Sarah for the wife Ethan had lost. But through it all, Clara and Ethan remained partners. They argued and made up, struggled and succeeded, grew older and somehow grew closer. The ranch became known throughout the territory. People came to buy horses from Ethan Cole and get medical advice from his wife. The community looked to them as leaders, as proof that hard work and determination could build something lasting. On their 10th anniversary, Ethan found Clara on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. Thinking about anything in particular? He asked, settling beside her. About that advertisement. about how it promised hardship guaranteed. Having regrets? Clara laughed. Not even slightly. I'm just thinking about how the advertisement sold it wrong. It should have promised hardship, yes, but also purpose, community, love, a life built by choice instead of circumstance. That wouldn't have fit on a page. No, but it would have been honest. She leaned against him. I chose hardship, and I'd choose it again, every single time. Even knowing everything we'd face, the blizzards and difficult births and endless work, especially knowing that, because all of it, every struggle, every triumph, made us who we are, made this life what it is. Clara gestured to the ranch spread before them. We built this together, from nothing but stubbornness and will. Ethan kissed the top of her head. You built most of it. I just held on and tried to keep up. We built it together, Clara insisted. That's what matters, not who did more, just that we did it side by side. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in brilliant colors. In the distance, they could hear their children playing, Hope's bossy voice directing her siblings, James's laughter, Grace and Sarah arguing over something trivial. You ever wonder what would have happened if you'd ignored my advertisement? Ethan asked. Sometimes, but not in a wishing way. More just curious? Clara smiled. I imagine I'd have married that awful man my brother chose, spent my life hosting tea parties and dying inside. And I'd have married someone practical and suitable who would have lasted maybe 2 years before giving up and leaving. Or you'd have stayed alone, worked yourself to death trying to manage everything solo. Probably. Ethan's arm tightened around her. We saved each other, I think. You saved me from solitude. I saved you from suffocation. We saved each other from half-lives, Clara agreed, and built a full one instead. As darkness fell, they made their way inside where their children waited. Hope, now 12, was helping Grace set the table. James was attempting to teach Sarah her letters with mixed success. The cabin they'd expanded over the years was filled with the noise and chaos and love of a real family. This was Clara's legacy. Not the townhouse in Philadelphia or the money her brother had left. Not even the ranch itself, though that mattered. Her legacy was this family. These children raised to be strong and capable and free to make their own choices. This partnership built on mutual respect and hard-won trust. This life she'd chosen and fought for and made real through sheer determination. Years later, when Clara was old and her children grown with families of their own, she would sit on that same porch and marvel at what she'd built. The ranch had expanded. The community had grown. Her grandchildren ran wild through the same fields where she'd once struggled to survive her first Montana winter. Ethan, his hair white and his face lined but his eyes still sharp, would sit beside her just as he always had. Any regrets, he'd ask, the question a comfortable tradition between them. Not a single one, she'd reply. The answer always the same. And it was true. Clara had left behind comfort and security for hardship and uncertainty. She'd traded a predictable life for a precarious one. She'd chosen struggle over ease, but in doing so she'd found something rare and precious. She'd found purpose, partnership, a life that was fully, completely hers. She'd found freedom, and that, Clara knew, was worth every frozen night, every difficult birth, every moment of doubt and fear and grinding work, worth every single second, because she'd chosen it, built it, lived it on her own terms, and there was no greater gift than that. The end came peacefully for Clara, decades after that first winter that had tried to kill her. She died in the bed she'd shared with Ethan, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, her hand clasped in his. Her last words were simple. Worth it. Every moment. Worth it. And they were. Every struggle, every triumph, every choice that had brought her from Philadelphia's gilded cage to Montana's brutal freedom. She'd lived a life that mattered, built a legacy that would endure, proven that strength wasn't just surviving hardship, but finding meaning within it. Clara Whitmore Cole had answered an advertisement promising nothing but difficulty and discovered everything worth having instead. And in the end, that made all the difference.